Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Friday, December 2nd, 2022. And if you'd like additional weather information on top of what I provide in this broadcast, you can go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. And it'll bring you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii to the lower left. And if you put your mouse there and point and click anywhere, it'll bring up forecast and any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories that are in effect for any place in the country. A good way to check up on what the weather's doing at friends and family's location. On the weather map this Friday afternoon, we have winter weather advisories, portions of the Dakotas, Minnesota, into western upper Michigan, Wisconsin. Wind advisories extending out through areas of the plains, and high wind warnings back through portions of Nebraska, Kansas, eastern Colorado, northeastern New Mexico. Also some red flag warnings for enhanced critical fire weather conditions. And then in the far west, also winter storm warnings for the Sierra Nevada of California, including the areas around Lake Tahoe. Here in Alaska, winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories cover a good portion of the northern half of the mainland due to areas of accumulating snow that may be mixed with some light freezing rain or drizzle at times. We've had some warmer air push in, especially aloft, and that's what creates this conditions favorable for some of that freezing precipitation. Also, with the cold weather that's been in place through areas of south central, some ice jams could develop on some of the creeks and smaller rivers in the Anchorage Bowl and lower Mat-Su Valley through the course of this weekend, so there could be some fluctuating water levels along those streams, potentially some minor flooding, but nothing that would be of a major impact. And this large area of high pressure, this ridge of high pressure that's been sitting over the Gulf and extending with a ridge up through the mainland, beginning kind of head eastward and begin to break down by early next week. That'll allow for a bit of a pattern change. This afternoon, Eagle reports some light snow and fog, so that moisture has made its way all the way from the Bering Sea coast now across the interior to the Alcan border. And we're going to see areas of snow mixed at times with a little light freezing rain or freezing drizzle occurring across much of the interior, especially north of the Alaska Range. Nome also reporting some light snow and fog. Temperature there just above freezing. Many temperatures along the Chukchi Sea coast, that's the northwest Arctic coast, and down along the west coast are hovering just above freezing by a couple of degrees, so relatively mild conditions for early December. Here are the current winter storm warnings in red: eastern Brooks Range, far eastern Arctic coast, northwest coast, as well as areas on the southwest side of the Brooks Range, Kotzebue Sound, Ambler, also the northern, western, and southern coast of the Seward Peninsula, including Nome, for accumulating snow, not especially heavy, but it could be mixed with some light freezing rain at times. And then the interior, we see a broad area from the interior of the Seward Peninsula extending eastward through the Yukon Valley up through Fort Yukon and Eagle, where there will be areas of snow. As of this afternoon, Fairbanks area picked up nearly a couple inches of snow. So again, we expect those periods of light snow mixed at times with a little bit of freezing rain or freezing drizzle to continue into Saturday afternoon, and in some cases through at least midnight Saturday night. And looking at satellite imagery, we can see that we have pretty good plume of moisture that comes in off of the Bering Sea and then cuts across the mainland, and that's what the moisture and warmer temperatures aloft that are driving these areas of accumulating snow that may be mixed at times with a little bit of light freezing rain or freezing drizzle. Southern parts of the state, quieter weather conditions, and in fact a bit more in the way of clearing will be developing over the Panhandle for the weekend, and those strong gap winds that were experienced earlier in the week will begin to diminish as well. Here's the weather map. We have that high showing up at the surface there out over the lower Gulf up through south central and the south side of the Alaska Range, with areas of light snow that may be mixed with a little freezing rain or freezing drizzle, and then a front that extends out across the Bering with precipitation along that. Tonight's weather map keeps more or less a trough front combo with a couple waves of low pressure riding along it, with the high still in place there, lower Gulf, North Pacific. A little colder air tries to ride in along the Arctic coast, creating some breezier conditions, and hence that's why we have the winter storm warnings still in effect for those areas. Now, kind of a double barrel low and frontal system will continue to pump in the milder, moist air up and along the west coast Saturday afternoon. And as we go into Sunday, that frontal system continues to push inland. So along that front will be just a renewed aspect of another push of moisture that could include, again, some snow that may be mixed with a light freezing rain or freezing drizzle, and even some plain old rain further south down toward the far southwest coast and Alaska Peninsula. But that high will begin to slowly shift east and begin to break down. Here's the low temperatures Saturday morning, teens areas of the Panhandle, 14 below Glen Allen. Single digits around Anchorage. Saturday afternoon highs getting back up near freezing in the Panhandle. Only in the teens, though. Colder temperatures there up through the Mat-Su Valley, teens for highs, and moderating temperatures further south and west. On Sunday morning, we could see readings again below zero at the Copper River Basin. 20s along a good chunk of the Panhandle. And then for Sunday afternoon, temperatures getting back up around and a bit above freezing in the Panhandle, but staying below freezing across south central, though milder air is creeping inward. 45 at Kodiak, 42 at King Salmon. Along the Arctic coast with the cloud cover and breezes, we've seen temperatures Saturday morning will stay near the freezing mark there in through Norton Sound. Saturday afternoon highs could make mid-30s there, 36 at Nome, even 34 way up there at Kaktovik, 33 at Fort Yukon, considering they were like 30 below zero this past week, so quite a temperature turnaround. And we will see temperatures Sunday morning still flirting around the freezing mark along the Seward coastline, including Norton Sound, lower Yukon Delta, and temperatures Sunday afternoon even maybe a tad warmer, generally at or above freezing on the west side of the state. So rather mild pattern along areas of the Southwest. We're going to see temperatures moderate there as well. Saturday morning lows will still be below freezing west side of the Alaska Range, going up the Kuskokwim River Basin. But Saturday afternoon, notice those temperatures: 35 at Imanok, 36 as you get further south down toward Bethel, 40s to near 50, say at Dutch Harbor. And then Sunday morning lows will be pushing just above freezing there along the southwest coast, creeping upwards toward Bethel. That frontal system moving inland, tendency for the precipitation in those areas of the southwest to just be plain old rain. So quick check, 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, December 8th through the 12th. Below normal temperatures will sit there in south central areas, south and east of the Alaska Range and the Panhandle, but remain a bit above normal, especially Nome south through Norton Sound and the Bethel areas. Precipitation will tend to average a bit above normal on the west side of the state there, December 8th through the 12th, as we would expect this ridge as it shifts eastward. The colder temperatures will move east with it, while milder air will still come in off the Bering Sea, and that will allow some additional moisture. Coming up next, we'll have Grant Smith from the Juneau Forecast Office with an outlook for the Panhandle.
Hello from Southeast Alaska. I'm meteorologist Grant Smith with the National Weather Service here in Juneau, Alaska, with a weather briefing for those of you in the southeastern Alaska Panhandle area. So what we're going to talk about here, the forecast overview, the overall weather pattern we're looking at, and then we'll talk about the weekend outlook, and then finish up with the 5-day, as next week we got some potential for some rain and snow. So the weather pattern, what we have going on, surface high pressure to our north will slide to the southeast into central Canada. That's going to allow for the gusty winds we had today to calm down through tonight. So today we had those clear skies, highs in the 20s and 30s, and then this weekend, very similar story. Dry, partly cloudy, lighter winds, and we're also looking at some warmer weather as well. So for this weekend, for Saturday and Sunday, for the south, temperatures reaching the upper 20s to near 30 degrees for Petersburg, Wrangell, well into the 30s for along the coast there in Port Alexander and Heidelberg. And then for Sunday, similar story, still reaching the temperatures in the upper 20s to 30s. And then for the north, Yeah, same story. Seeing these highs in the 30s across the area. Juneau reaching the lower 30s there on Saturday and on Sunday, but along the coast there, Sitka reaching the middle to even upper 30s possible this weekend. And so very little to no impacts expected once we hit to the weekend. And then next week, precip chances begin to increase early next week with rain and snow across the Panhandle by the middle of the week. So stay plugged into the forecast on weather.gov/Juneau as we bring you the latest through the weekend. So for the National Weather Service here in Juneau, Alaska, I've been meteorologist Grant Smith.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's now time to look at your aviation weather, and if you have a flight planned either Saturday or Sunday, we continue to have a ridge of high pressure that's anchored over the Gulf of Alaska with a ridge extending northward up into the mainland interior. This ridge will actually amplify, sharpen a bit before it gradually pushes eastward later in the weekend. Meanwhile, out in the western Bering Sea, low pressure will track eastward with a frontal system, and we have strong southerly flow ahead of this system, so it's going to keep a steady northward push of milder and moist air along the west coast. That'll include areas of mixed precipitation, and the clouds that are bearing that precipitation will have icing potential aloft. We expect widespread IFR conditions along areas of the central Yukon Valley, extending back along the west coast, including Norton Sound, and out over much of the central Bering. Saturday morning, as we work our way through Saturday afternoon, we see widespread IFR conditions persisting from the central interior between the Alaska Range and Brooks Range, back out through the Seward Peninsula and Norton Sound, out through St. Lawrence and St. Matthew. And for Sunday morning, note there will be some pockets of IFR near and south of the Alaska Range, up along the Tanana Valley and in the northeast corner of the state. Meanwhile, though, we expect the IFR conditions to continue along areas of the Chukchi Sea coast, down through the Seward Peninsula and along the southwest coast, including the YK deltas. And Sunday afternoon, widespread IFR conditions will persist in those areas along the west coast and also out over the open waters well offshore of the Gulf. And looking at pass conditions, Anatuvik Pass on Saturday should generally see IFR conditions. There may be a brief interval or two of MVFR. Same thing at Adigan Pass. And then further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill should generally see VFR conditions. And as we go up along the Alaska Range, that will generally be the case. VFR at Rainy, though it could become MVFR. Windy Pass should hold on to VFR conditions, though Isabel Pass will see MVFR conditions early Saturday give way to VFR conditions despite that high pressure ridge in place. There's some trapped moisture off to the south that could start out IFR Saturday morning there south of Isabel Pass, and then Mentasta Pass should generally see VFR conditions on Saturday. Further south and west, Tanita Pass, IFR conditions early, giving way to MVFR conditions. Portage Pass may see IFR conditions, especially along the western half, giving way, or at least trying to give way, to VFR conditions for Saturday afternoon. And then further east in through the northern portion of the Panhandle, we expect widespread VFR conditions at Chilkoot and White Passes. Freezing levels are highest up through southwest areas of the state. They rise above 4,000 feet south of the Yukon River to 6,000 feet from the Kenai Peninsula down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula to almost 8,000 feet there in through the central Aleutians. The greatest threat of icing will be along areas of the eastern Russian coast, including the Gulf of Anadyr on up through just south of the Bering Strait, especially in the cloud areas above 6,000 feet, because again, we have that warmer air aloft streaming northward along the eastern half of the Bering Sea and along the west coast. Also expect some areas of moderate icing potential along the spine and south of the Brooks Range, and we would expect the IFR conditions to be rather widespread there along areas of the west coast with the potential for icing. Upper level jet stream winds, you can see that ridge at 30,000 feet. The ridge is centered south and southeast of Kodiak Island with a broad ridge axis extending northward to the Chukchi Sea and far eastern Russia. Strongest winds at 700 millibars or 9,000 feet. Notice that flow there, the mid-level flow of 50 to 60 knots. knots across much of the central and northern Bering Sea from the south-southwest. And then as we bring that down to 3,000 feet, the low pressure that's out through the western portion of the Bering ahead of it, south-southwest winds 45 to 55 knots, transporting that milder and moist air northward along the west coast. Turbulence, potential for some turbulence, surface to 6,000 feet along the south side of the Brooks Range, surface to 4,000 feet through the Yukon Flats and back toward the Seward Peninsula, as well as St. Lawrence Island, and then a broad area of turbulence, moderate turbulence expected along the Aleutian Chain and creeping upward through the southern half of the Alaska Peninsula, surface to 4,000 feet. So that wraps up your flight weather. If you do have a flight planned this weekend, check the latest forecast and certainly have a safe flight if you get off the ground.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. He is here and has been here many times to talk to us about weather satellites and how those can help Alaskans understand our weather, how we can do better detection, keep more people safe from things even like volcanic ash. But today, Eric, you're going to talk to us a little bit more about weather satellites and how that can keep Alaskans safe and protect our property from wildfire. Right?
That's right, Dave. Today's topic is where there's smoke, there's fire. And thanks for having us back again to Alaska
Anytime.
Weather. Well, weather satellites have a lot of different instruments on them. It turns out that the electromagnetic spectrum has a lot going on in it, and only one part of that is visible light, what we see.
Right.
Weather satellites, of course, report that. Today's topic is wildfires.
Okay.
There are some people who say that in Alaska in the summertime you don't have severe weather. These people are usually from Oklahoma or somewhere. And F5 tornadoes tend not to occur in Alaska.
Right.
People have also said what we do have in the summer. What is Alaska's severe summer weather can be hydrology,
Right.
flash flood and erosion in the mountains and things like that, and fires, wildfires.
Absolutely.
Those were here in 2004, certainly remember that. We've got an example here from 2014. Now, it was a quiet season overall, but in May, down on the Kenai Peninsula, we had a wildfire on the Funny River, and this is a satellite image from a satellite, a polar orbiter that went right over Alaska, and we can see the plume of smoke coming out of that fire on the Kenai, curling down. It's caught in the wind.
Right.
It goes down toward Kodiak Island, curves around. You can see it circulating around a low pressure system that's in the Gulf of Alaska.
It was a beautiful picture.
Oh my gosh.
Except there was a fire.
There's a fire there. The nice thing is with this satellite image, you can tell where the fire origin is, where the smoke is coming from. And it's a color image. We're looking at the wavelength spectrum of about 0.4 to 0.7 micrometers or microns. That's what the human eye would see. If you were riding on the satellite and looked down, you could see this kind of an image.
Right.
So that's pretty nice. But it turns out there's more to the electromagnetic spectrum than just visible light.
Okay.
You've heard of infrared, ultraviolet, that kind of thing. If we move into longer wavelengths, let's go to one specifically, 3.7 microns.
Okay, 3.7.
Why worry about that one?
Okay.
Well, we've got an example here. 3.7, it turns out, happens to be very sensitive to a certain temperature range, temperatures where fires burn.
Okay.
And so we've got an example zoomed in a little more from that same Funny River fire down on the Kenai Peninsula, and we can see that you get up into a few hundred degrees Fahrenheit, and that's where the colors are. We can see there on the Funny River fire to the west and to the east, almost a horseshoe shape there, is not only we're seeing where the fire is in a general sense, but specifically where it's the active fire.
That is where
front.
it's burning right now.
And it's
Amazing.
3.7 microns is the important temperature there.
Okay.
That's right.
So this is really important to firefighters on the ground, people that are making plans and directing the firefighters on where they need to go and cut the trenches and keep people safe.
You know it. If you want to fight that fire, you got to know where it is.
Okay.
You got to know the leading edge. We've also got a movie loop, nothing quite like animating it in time.
Yeah.
You can see the fire spreading out over time with a succession of film or a succession of images. Now, this is one channel, 3.7 micron. You know, we looked at that color smoke image before. Right. And that's actually a red, a green, and a blue. That's how you get color imagery. What if you took 3 different wavelengths in the infrared? You went from like 2.2 micron, 1.5 micron, up to 3.7. You mix them together, you get this other kind of color image, which is even a better way to sharply bring out the details of where that leading edge of the fire is.
Okay.
You'll note, though, in the infrared, Guess what? We don't see the smoke. That's too bad. And on these movie loops, you can see the clouds go by. These channels can't see through clouds. The lesson is there's no one perfect solution. You got to have the visible, you got to have some of that infrared single 3.7 channel, some of the infrared mixing to help get a different perspective. Another one, we've talked before about a fun channel called the day-night band.
Yes, one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, and in Alaska in the winter, it's great. We got all this darkness. The day-night band is so sensitive to seeing light. You can see features that otherwise aren't available. Now in Alaska, when you have a forest fire, it tends to be light out all the time. It's our summer. But we can go down south to the Rim Fire in California in 2013. Now, okay, it was in California, not Alaska, but Alaskan crews went down to fight that fire, so we can talk about it here on Alaska Weather. Here we have a 3.7 micron channel shot of the rim fire, again, kind of a horseshoe shape, showing that active fire front down there. And then we'll look again to the day-night band, the visible light, and then you can see how the fire is all bright. You can see the active fire front and actually the city lights over there too. Turns out that the cities, while they're active in a social sense, are not really hot in a fire sense. So they don't show up in the 3.7 micron. They're not hot like a fire is, but the fire in the cities look the same from a visible light perspective. And a fun thing here too is that we can see the smoke plume going north from the rim fire on the day-night band. So if we were ever to have, like in 2004 in Alaska, you get dark at night, we still had an active fire season that year. That was you know, that really bad year. The day-night band didn't exist then, but if we had fires now in August, we could use it then. The lesson here is weather satellites, they offer many different wavelengths of light. Some are used for different purposes, and some of these we just looked at tonight are especially helpful here in Alaska to find and to track the behavior of these wildfires so the crews can go out there and do their jobs.
Sure. So a satellite toolbox for the firefighting crews and the fire weather forecasters, and it just underlines how important satellites are, especially for Alaska and our mission for the National Weather Service to protect life and property, and also to enhance the national economy. So wonderful stuff there, Eric. And people can look at pictures like this anytime by going to gina.alaska.edu. You'll find images there all around Alaska at various times of the year, and not just about fire weather, but volcanic ash and smoke and anything else you want to check out. They're always beautiful pictures and always interesting to look at no matter what time of the day. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We appreciate it and welcome you back anytime. For this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. See you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and looking at the sea ice edge, we've had quite a push of southerly winds bringing in milder temperatures just above freezing along the northwest coast and much of the west coast surrounding the Seward Peninsula, and certainly further south down along the southwest coast. This has led to ice shifting a bit with the stronger winds and also some minor melting, and we expect that to continue here for a bit longer. Along the southwest coast, the areas of ice that are in place, though, we'll feel that change coming here with the next frontal system that'll just enhance that southerly flow with a push of milder air in along areas, especially Kuskokwim Bay down through Bristol Bay. And looking at Saturday's marine forecast, inner channels, lighter winds for a change compared to the past week. North winds 15 knots, waves running a few feet. The outer coast, northwest to north winds 15 to 20 knots with waves 6 to as high as 9-10 feet south of Sitka. Sunday, we are looking for winds to generally have a northerly component there across the inner channels, 20 to 15 knots. Waves running 3-4 feet. The outer coast winds will be out of the northwest to north, 20 to 25 knots generally speaking, with waves running 6 feet off of Yakutat to as much as 8-9 feet there south of Sitka and off of Craig. For the northwestern Gulf, variable winds in Prince William Sound at 10 knots, waves a couple of feet. West winds off the Kenai Peninsula with waves running 5 feet, and then lower Cook Inlet, look for northeast winds 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. On Sunday, variable winds off the Kenai coast and in Prince William Sound around 10 knots, waves 2 feet in Prince William Sound. Winds coming in to the mouth there of Cook Inlet will be out of the south-southeast at 25 knots with waves of 6 to 7 feet. Across Kodiak Island on Saturday, winds will be southwest at 20 knots, waves generally 5 feet. But as you head southwestward down along the Alaska Peninsula, winds pick up 30 to 35 knots from the southeast, with waves upwards of 10, 11 feet south of Sand Point and 10 feet north of Cold Bay. Look for winds to increase across the region and especially the Alaska Peninsula with the next frontal system. 40 to 45 knot southeast to south gales, waves 15 to 20 feet on the North Pacific side and running around 12 feet on the Bering side. For the Aleutian chain, winds will be out of the southeast to south at 30 to 35 knots, eastern and central Aleutians picking up to 40 knot gales there west of Adak through Kiska. Waves generally running 10 to 14 feet on the North Pacific side and 9 to 12 feet on the Bering side. For Sunday, winds turn more westerly across the area, 35 to upwards of 45 knot gales. The length of the chain with waves running 18 to 22 feet on the North Pacific side and generally around and over 20 feet away from any sheltering from the islands. 50 knot storm force south winds near and west of Kiska. And along the southwest coast, winds turn southeasterly 30 knots, waves generally running around 12 feet vicinity of St. Matthew and St. Paul, 7 to 9 feet surrounding Nunavik Island, and winds out of the southeast there, Norton Sound waves not quite significant. But for Sunday with that frontal system, 35 to 45 knot gales across the area. Look for southeast winds to turn southwesterly and waves generally building 15 to 20 feet south of St. Lawrence, down west and south of Nunavik Island, including the area back towards St. Paul and St. George. Along the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the west, 35 to 45 knot gales, especially north there of Dead Horse Prudhoe Bay, where ice is in place. Winds northwesterly, Utqiagvik down through Point Lay, but turning more easterly as we go through the lower Chukchi Sea and the Bering Strait, increasing southeasterly to 30 knots north of St. Lawrence Island. Waves 3 to 5 feet the lower Chukchi Sea, up to 10 feet north side of St. Lawrence. And then Sunday, east and southeast winds across the region. Easterly winds 30 knots along the Arctic coast, but increasing 35 to 40 knot gales from the southeast through the Chukchi Sea coast and down through the Bering Strait, with waves building 10 feet or so through the lower Chukchi Sea and as much as 15 feet on the north side of St. Lawrence. So we have that frontal system pumping in the warm air, south-southwest winds ahead of it later tonight and into Saturday. Those southeast winds on Saturday afternoon will turn more southwesterly as that system passes on by up into the west and southwest coast. So thank you for watching the show, and be sure to join me again here on Saturday and Sunday evening.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.